Good evening, everyone. Today I'd like to review the general features and functions of the APX Motorola radios. Today we'll start with the mobile radios, all of which I believe were purchased with the E5 control head. What we have here is an overview of the buttons and knobs on the control head and what their function is. The E5 control head uses LED indicators and a backlight for its display, along with a series of icons that will indicate what operation or operations are occurring between the user and the radio, or the radio itself and the system. As you can see here, there are quite a few icons. We're not going to go over all of these now, but as Brian had mentioned, these presentations will be made available to you, and you are welcome to review all of these as in detail as you wish later on. There are a collection of status alert tones, a few of which I would like us to get familiar with now, which include the talk permit tone, the inhibit tone, and the emergency alert tone. I'll elaborate a bit more on these and when you may experience them later. There are a collection of Towards the left of the control head, we have 3 LED status indicator lights. Red, yellow, or green will light up depending on what is being done with the radio. You'll see the red light illuminate when you are transmitting, a yellow light when the radio is receiving, or a green light when the radio is either in the scan list programming mode or while it is performing its self-test during the power-up sequence. We also have in the upper left corner of the radio's display the signal strength indicator icon. That icon will change depending on whether the radio is transmitting, receiving, or sitting idle on the system. A few general radio features, as well as how we have the menu items configured on the control head. To start, we have the power button on the left corner of the control head. Now, this may seem obvious that if you push that button, the radio will power either off or on. Most or all of these radios are going to be wired to some form of ignition sense. What that means is the radio is going to either power on with the vehicle's ignition, or more typically with our fire and medical apparatus, it will be wired to the batteries, which will serve as that ignition sense. Simple troubleshooting matter I'd like to review real quick. One we encounter often is that if the radio is powered on or off, separate from its ignition sense being turned on or off, you may desynchronize the ignition sense of the radio with the actual ignition or battery power. If this occurs, you can resync the two by using the power button to put the radio into the appropriate mode that matches the vehicle's ignition or battery, either on or off. The volume knob is next to the power button. You can rotate that knob clockwise to increase the radio's volume, or counterclockwise to decrease the radio's volume. And beneath the volume knob, we have the dimmer button. This serves two functions. Primarily, this button will adjust the backlight brightness on the control head display. We can do this by performing a short press of the button. Now, if I press and hold this button, or perform a long press, you'll see that I can put the radio into night mode, which inverts the black and white balance of the display. I can then independently adjust the brightness of the backlight while in night mode as well. Over on the far side of the control head, we have the home button. By pressing and holding this button, you will be reverted to your primary dispatch as your selected channel. Now, it does not matter what zone or channel position you are in your fleet map. this button will always revert you back to that primary dispatch talk group position. You can change zones throughout your fleet map by using the up or down buttons on the four-way navigation. And then you can use your mode knob to change your selected channel position once you've selected the zone that you wish to be in. I'd now like to look at the first three menu items on the control head of the radio, labeled MS1, MS2, and MS3. The easiest way that I could think to define the function of these buttons is by likening them to the presets on your car's FM stereo. By pressing and holding these buttons, we can set the radio and to save and revert to any channel or talk group in the fleet map that you'd like. So an example of this would be that if I set SC-TAC1 as my MS1 or mode select 1, then I use my home button to revert back to my primary dispatch. I can quickly navigate back to SC-TAC1 with a short press of the MS1 menu button. Our next menu items we have here are the scan and nuisance buttons. By pressing the scan button, you can toggle scan on or off. And you'll note that when scan is turned on, you'll see the Z icon in the upper portion of the radio's display. And then we have our nuisance delete menu button next to that. The nuisance delete button allows you to temporarily mute a channel or talk group without having to edit your scan list. A nuisance delete can be performed by pressing the button while that talk group or channel is currently active. And you can undo a nuisance delete either by toggling scan on or off, changing your selected mode or channel position, or power cycling the radio. By using the left or right directional arrows on my four-way navigation, I'll find additional menu items on the radio menu. The first one is my scan list edit, abbreviated SCNL. When I press this button, my radio will enter the scan list programming mode. You'll note that when I enter the scan list programming mode, my menu buttons will change to select, delete, or recall, abbreviated RCL. Pressing the select button will add a talk group or channel to my scan list. And you'll note that when I do so, the scan icon appears above my selected talk group that I've added. I can remove a talk group or channel from my scan list with the delete button. And I can press the recall button to quickly toggle through my scan list to see what talk groups or channels are currently in my scan list. And we exit the scan list programming mode with a short press of the home button. A few things worth noting about scan is that you cannot remove your primary dispatch from the scan list. You also cannot nuisance delete your primary dispatch. Some other matters to consider are that you cannot scan a conventional channel while selected on a trunking talk group, and vice versa. You cannot scan a different trunking system's trunking talk group from your system's trunking talk group. So for example, if you're selected on a Cumberland County trunking talk group, your radio would not be able to scan a trunking talk group on York County system. Your scan list is also set to a maximum of 15 positions, or available channel positions it can hold, and of course one of those is your primary dispatch. Up next, one that I'm sure many of us are familiar with, is transmitting on the radio, which is done by pressing the push-to-talk button on the mic. As I mentioned a little bit ago, when you press the push to talk button, you'll hear the talk permit tone. And in some instances, you may hear a different sound. Rarely or possibly never, you may hear this sound, which is a system busy tone. If you hear this tone, then all you need to do is let off the push to talk button until you hear the talk permit tone, at which point you'll be clear to re-press the push to talk and transmit your message. The talk path capacity for this county's P25 system is pretty immense, so I would honestly be surprised if you ever encounter this tone. This is just one of those subjects that we wanted to review so everybody is aware. If you do receive a system busy, your radio is put into a queue on the system, which is where you'll wait until you hear the talk permit tone, at which point you know it is your turn to talk. If you try to key up on a talk group while someone else is talking on it, you'll hear an inhibit tone, which means that you need to let off the mic and wait until that talk group is clear, and then it is your turn to talk. The next menu item to discuss is the over-the-air rekey button. This is applicable only to encrypted radios, and we'll touch on what defines an encrypted radio here in a moment. Over-the-air rekeying is a method to update your radio's encryption keys over the radio system. There are a couple of instances where this may be necessary. One being if your radio receives an update that requires it to have an encryption key it previously did not have or need, then we can do an over-the-air rekey after the radio's programming has been updated, which eliminates the need to get a tech on site to manually load that new encryption key into the radio. Another instance where over-the-air rekeying would be necessary is when what is called a key roll is performed. What a key roll does is it changes the encryption material used for a talk group or channel, at which point doing an over-the-air rekey will automatically sync your radio's encryption with the new encryption material available. There's a server on the system dedicated to ensuring radios using encryption can receive the encryption they need. If for any reason you attempt to do an over-the-air rekey and it is unsuccessful, then I'd advise contacting your system administrators so we can begin looking into the issue. What encryption does is it will take a clear voice message or data and use a sequence of characters, called an encryption key, to encode or encrypt it as it goes out over the air. Only devices holding a matching encryption key will be able to properly decode or decrypt any intelligence going over an encrypted talk group, meaning any devices that do not have the necessary encryption key will not be able to properly receive information while attempting to listen on an encrypted talk group. And you can tell that you're on a talk group that is encrypted because you'll see the icon here, which looks like a circle with a slash through it. One of the reasons that we wanted to touch on encryption is because we are moving away from a proprietary radio system and joining a P25 public safety radio system. What this means is if ever there is a need or want to repurpose a radio, there may be an incompatibility for that radio between where it's coming from and where it's going to. So an example of this would be if we're trying to take a fire radio and we want to make it an EMS or law enforcement radio, there's a very good chance that will not be possible because all but 2 fire companies in the county have purchased radios that do not support encryption. So, and you can contact your system administrators for any more information that you may have about radio compatibility. Our last menu item to go over on the mobiles is the Receive Signal Strength Indicator button, or RSSI. This button is largely used as a troubleshooting aid for techs or technical folk. By pressing this button, I'll be able to see what site my radio is affiliated to and what the actual signal strength is coming from that site, rather than just having to rely on the bars on the icon in the corner. I can get an actual reading of what my signal strength would be. So if I press that button, you'll see that I'm on Cumberland simulcast with a reading of RSSI at 73 or negative 94 dBm. Moving into some of the trunking specific features in the radios. They will have emergency capabilities, and you initiate an emergency call by pressing the orange button on the top right corner of the control head. When you press that button, there are a few things that are going to happen. One is you will get an orange banner on the display of the radio, indicating that you've just declared an emergency. You'll also hear an emergency tone. Also at this time, you're going to have what we call a 10-second hot mic. This means that you have a 10-second window where you don't have to press your push-to-talk button. You can simply speak, and the radio's mic will remain open while you communicate your message. Also, while your radio is in an emergency call, you will have priority over other users on that talk group back at dispatch. Other radios that are either monitoring the emergency talk group or on the assigned fire ops channel where the emergency would stay on that talk group, your radios on that talk group also will know that, one, somebody has declared an emergency, and two, they will be able to see who has declared the emergency. Once everything has been sorted out after an emergency call has been initiated and it's determined that we can clear the emergency, the first step is that your dispatcher is going to have to acknowledge the emergency, at which point you will be advised to clear the emergency on your end, which is done by pressing and holding down the emergency button. I would hold and press that button for about 2 or 3 seconds. After that, you will see the orange emergency banner disappear from your radio display, and your dispatcher is going to ask that you key up your radio one more time to verify that the emergency has in fact been properly cleared on both ends. And then we're back to business as usual. Dynamic regroup is another trunking feature with the P25 system. A dynamic regroup allows your system administrators to redirect your radios at the system level to any talk group on the system. That could even be a talk group that is not actually programmed into your radio. So if you have a large-scale event and there is an assigned operations channel that maybe is not programmed in your radio, your dispatcher or system administrator will let you know that you've been assigned to a dynamic regroup, at which point you'll navigate to the dynamic regroup position in your fleet map, and you will be able to communicate directly with other radios that are also either assigned to a dynamic regroup or are on the talk group that the dynamic regroup has been steered to. Keep in mind, if you have not been advised that your radio is a part of a dynamic regroup when one has been established, and you go to the dynamic regroup position in your fleet map, you will not be able to transmit or receive with those radios that have been assigned a dynamic regroup. One last matter to quickly review is site trunking. What site trunking is a loss of all connectivity between a tower site and the system's core. We included this in the presentation to try and make sure we're feeling well-rounded with an understanding of what you may see sometimes in a trunking environment. However, there are many redundant links between each site and the core, though there are some rare instances where your radio may indicate that the site it's connected to is in site trunking. When this occurs, your radio will be able to operate in a normal trunking mode locally with other radios affiliated on that same tower site. However, you will be unable to communicate with radios affiliated to a different tower site. You will also not be able to communicate back to your dispatchers if this does occur. Again, very unlikely to happen. However, we want to make sure everybody is comfortable and well-rounded ahead of cutover. That is all that I actually have to review with the mobile radios. Up next, I would like to review the APX 8000 and the APX 6000. We have lumped both of these models of radio into one presentation because ergonomically these radios are identical. The switches, the buttons, the knobs are the exact same. The difference between the APX 6000 and the APX 8000 is the APX 8000 supports multi-band operation, whereas the APX 6000 is a single band radio. Here we have a high-level view of every button, switch, and knob on the radio, though we're going to dive into these in more manageable portions. The icons on the portable are going to be essentially identical to what you'll see on the mobile, with one key difference being the battery indicator. This indicator will change to reflect what the battery's current capacity is. One note I would like to make on that is if the battery indicator does not appear on your portable radio, that is indicative it is time to condition your portable's battery. To condition your portable battery, simply put it in the charger that was purchased with your portable. The Impress chargers will automatically condition the batteries of the APX radios when they are due for it. You'll know that your charger has put the battery in a conditioning cycle because the status light on the charger will turn amber or yellow. The charger has begun to charge the battery when its indicator light will turn red, and when your battery is fully charged, that indicator light will turn green. For those of us that purchase vehicular chargers for the portables, those will not condition the batteries. However, the status light on the vehicular charger will indicate when the portable battery is due for reconditioning. The portable radios make the same sounds as the mobile radio does. And the LED status light on the portable radio lights up with the same colors for the same reasons as the mobile radio would. The only difference being that the light is located on the top of the portable. Some general features of the radio. Turning the radio on or off may seem obvious to some. Turning the power/volume knob clockwise, you will first feel the knob click. At this point, the radio will begin its self-test and will power up. You can continue to turn this knob clockwise to increase the radio's volume, or counterclockwise to decrease the volume. By turning the knob far enough counterclockwise, you will feel it again click, and the radio will power down. And just as we saw on the mobile, the APX portables have a home button on the front, which will revert you to your primary dispatch talk group.